Good morning, everyone, and can I welcome everyone to Development Control Committee A of Mid Suffolk District Council. Just before we start, just need to run through some of the domestic arrangements first of all. The WCs are situated outside the meeting room opposite the lift and stairs. There's also cold waters available in the breakout area. If the fire alarm does sound, can you please leave the council chamber by following the fire exit signs, and we need to gather at Ipswich Town Football Club training pitch. Please do not re-enter the building until we're told it is safe to do so. Can I ask everyone just to double check your mobile phones are switched off or at least on silent? If they do ring, it's a donation to the chairman's charity, is our tradition. I'd like to remind everyone present that the meeting will be broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewings. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to this meeting, you'll be deemed by the council to have consented to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The council, members of the public and press may record, film or photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. And finally, can I just ask members and officers when we speak to please make sure we do turn the microphone on and turn it off when we have finished. Just for the benefit of some members of the public who may not be familiar with the way we operate, just do some introductions. On my right are the councillors, district councillors, elected councillors and myself who will make a decision on the applications before us today. And then starting on my right we have Ian Duprez, who's our legal advisor. Then we have, on my left, we have officers who make everything work on time and schedule and make sure everything is broadcast correctly. And on the back and on my right is Gemma and the team who are the planning officers who will present the applications before us today. And then finally, in Mid Suffolk, you may speak on an application in your ward, but you may not vote on it. So if that's the case, you'll be asked to sit on the other side of the chamber and you may speak, but as I said, not vote. I think that covers the basics. So, moving on to the agenda. First item is apologies for absence and substitutions, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Turner and Councillor Warboys is substituting today.
Thank you. Do we need to receive any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members? Oh, hands going up. Yeah. Councillor Haddingham and Councillor Miller.
Just the Needham Market one. I'm on the Mid Suffolk Growth Board.
In my case, I'm the Vice Chair of Stowmarket Town Council Planning Committee, and we've previously discussed item 7E.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anything else? No. Just for the record, item number DC 19039191, which is 6 Church Street in I, has been withdrawn and is not before us today. Thank you. Any declarations of lobbying? No, none received. Thank you. Any declarations of personal site visits by members? No, thank you. If we can now turn to the minutes of the previous meeting, which are within your papers.
They're in the table papers, Chair. They're in the table papers, sir.
Oh, they're tabled. Sorry, yes, they're in the late papers, tabled papers. If you can just have a quick look at those, and if I just run through them, and if there are any points that you feel are not accurate, if you just raise your hand. Page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and page 10. Can I sign those as a true record of the meeting? Is that agreed? Agreed? Thank you. I'll do that after the meeting. Right, so we now need to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. Are there any, please?
None received, Chair.
Okay, well, we'll move swiftly on then to the first item, the schedule of planning applications. The first planning application before us today is DC 19-05166, Needham Lake, Coddenham Road, Needham Market, which starts on page 9 of our papers. And over to Gemma, who will present the application.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. Yes, this is an application for a visitor centre at Needham Lakes. That one, sorry. we go. So this is the application site, just to the west of the main road that comes down into Needham Market. And we've got some site photos in a minute, which will show that a bit more. Again, the application site with some constraints on. We can just see the two in yellow are grade 2 listed buildings. And then as we come down the road here, we're looking at coming into Needham Market. But as I said, I've got some aerials just to show that a bit better. The site is within the flood zone, and we have had comments from the Environment Agency, which I'll provide a little bit more information on as we get to those points. And then again, it is within close proximity to some SSSI and landscape area designations, but overall the site itself is outside of those and not considered to risk particular harm, but again I'll come on to that. So this is the site itself. The location of the building will be in here. We've got the Mustard Pot Veterinary Surgery itself in there, and then we're coming down towards the listed footbridge and the mill to the south of the site through here. And then again, slightly further out, we can see the lakes to either side. This is the Needham Lake car boot, for members who may be familiar with that, that's used on a Wednesday and a Saturday for car boot, and that shares the same access as the site, and then the wider car park area for access to Needham Lakes itself. And then just a zoomed out version just to show where we are in conjunction. So the parish for this one is Creating St Mary, but essentially it's on the border with Needham Market and said Needham Lakes itself. This is the existing site plan. We can see there are a couple of existing buildings on site, which essentially is sort of the ice cream concession. That is proposed for removal. And then we look at the proposed site plan, a new surface through to access here with the building, with service access to the rear, and then also access off the footpaths to the front of the building through here, looking out onto the play area and down towards the river. And then we've got a sort of 3D visual of it there, what it looks like. So we're looking at a single-storey building with a monopitch roof. The sort of main frontage of the building is set back under that roof, so we've got some outdoor seating to the front, and that also provides some shading to the interior of the building. And then elevations again for members that we can see. We're looking at solar panels to the roof as well. And again, side elevations there. The building is predominantly to provide a visitor centre, but it's a combination visitor centre and cafe with a mixed-use space with a proposal to have flexible options inside. Includes access to the toilets designed so that that can provide multiple options, whether the cafe and visitor centre are open or not. That's within control. There is also a changing places facility in there for disabled facilities. We've got the cafe and kitchen. We can see the service area to the rear, and there's also various outdoors servicing and storage for the cafe and visitor centre, and that outdoor seating, but that's under the cover through that area, which looks out onto the existing play area. Now, here we can see sections through the building. These are here because the site, as I mentioned, is within the flood zone 3. So it is an area liable to flooding, and we have had a lot of discussions with the Environment Agency about this. There's been a flood risk assessment provided, and the building is shown lifted above the floodplain so that it's lifted. There'll be a void underneath. The Environment Agency have confirmed that they have no objection to this proposal, subject to there being a condition to ensure that the void is maintained. So essentially that void underneath doesn't get silted up or blocked up, so it would affect the functional floodplain. Provided that that's something we felt we're happy to do by condition, they were raising no objection to the proposal, and I'm content to do that by means of condition. So overall, although yes, it is floodplain, because of what's been provided, that because it has been lifted up above what is expected to be the flood levels and this mitigation provided, we're content that that wouldn't pose an unacceptable risk. And then just some site photos. So this is the entrance to Needham Lakes itself. And looking down with the mustard pot on our right, down essentially in towards Needham Market. And then back this way, we're looking up towards essentially the A14 junction would be up there if we carried on up the road. And then access through to the site itself with the car boot entrance and exit on the right. And again, we can see some of the parking that's there. There's no proposed changes to any of the parking. And then again, we come through the access road onto the Needham Lakes car park. These are some of the existing structures which would be expected to be removed, and the building itself would be just beyond that point. And again, so we can see the existing play area, and then we're looking through at the listed mill, and the footbridge is just sort of essentially underneath that as well. And then again, just towards the lakes in this case, which we can see the existing path there, and there would be another pathway up through here to our left. And then again, this is essentially on the bridge, so we're looking down again at the listed mill and the separation between the site and the mill. We have had comments from Heritage who accept that while it is essentially within its setting, because of the design, character and appearance of the building, it's not considered to result in any harm to that listed building or in terms of the listed structures in here. And then again, so we're on the part of that listed structure here, looking towards the site up here. So we can see it is a reasonable distance away. I think that's why Heritage have accepted, combined with the design, not to cause any harm. And then again, looking back across. This is looking through to the Mustard Pot Veterinary Surgery. There's a fairly substantial hedgerow there at the moment. Obviously, midwinter, we're not getting a lot of the foliage on it, but it's there. There's no proposal to affect that or to make any changes to that hedgerow. And then again, we're essentially stood on the site, so you can see how it links to the play area, but it does remain some separation to that mill building. And then looking across the car park, this would be the edge of the building. And then again, just to come back to that 3D visual view for members, that essentially this is a visitor centre to support Needham Lakes. We consider it's got benefits to the tourism and economy through its links to Needham Market to support that existing recreational use. We don't consider it's got harm in respect of the flood zones, heritage, neighbour amenity or highway safety, and therefore the recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions? Yes, Councillor Field. Work down the line. And Councillor Mansell.
Just about, you show solar panels on the roof. They're not visible in the 3D pictures, and they seem to be at an incredibly low angle. Are they really going to be effective, or is it just a bit of greenwash for?
I haven't got any information about how effective or otherwise they would be. It's not something we would seek per se for this kind of building. We have suggested a condition to make sure they implement their renewable energy scheme, because they have got a whole scheme in place, more than just the solar panels. Potentially what they would add, I can't confirm what
We can ask
percentage
the
we'll be looking
applicant
at.
when they come forward.
Okay.
Councillor Mansell.
Thank you. I too was going to ask about the solar panels because the roof slopes to the north. So I was a bit concerned about the efficiency of them. And then I spotted on your enlarged diagram that they are slightly tilted, but that doesn't look like an optimum angle. But I'm interested in your response because section 4.2 on page 16 and 17 does say that solar panels are proposed. So one assumes that that is what we are granting permission for. But anyway, I'll leave the solar panels to the applicant. What I would like to ask is, has there been any consideration of rainwater harvesting for use of the toilets?
I don't think I've had any information on rainwater harvesting proposed. But again, perhaps that's something the applicant can give some more information on.
There is in the condition something about a water butt, and I wondered if that had anything to do with it.
Okay, so in the flood risk assessment that's proposed, it mentions water butt, but doesn't kind of confirm whether that is part of the strategy or is not part of the strategy. And given the benefits a water butt can offer, it seemed sensible to secure that by way of condition. So that's related to the overall drainage of the site rather than its reuse.
Yep. Councillor Warboys.
Thank you. I just was going to sort of expand on a bit. There's some concerns raised about the location of the centre because it's not close to the current parking for blue badge holders. So the concern was about the width of the paths and the surface material so people in wheelchairs could access the centre.
So there isn't any blue badge parking on the Needham Lakes site as it stands. The parking is essentially not marked out. The only space that is marked on that site is for the electric vehicle charging point. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's not essentially marked at all. And that is outside of the red line of what we're looking at. Whether that's something that we could take away separately in terms of the applicant being Mid-Suffolk, that they could mark that out. And I suppose where the planning would come to is the fact that this is to support that current use. There is currently that parking and they're not proposing any changes to it. And then with respect to the path, we've had confirmation of the materials because also our waste team were concerned about wheeling the bins along the paths and what they would be like. I've had a confirmation of change to the materials, so it would essentially be a smooth surface to allow access along both the path and the service access.
Thank you.
Councillor Muller.
My question relates to a comment made by the Mid-Suffolk Disability Forum regarding the facilities available for severely disabled people. Notably, would there be a hoist and an adult-sized changing bed in the disabled facility?
I think we might have to just confirm that with the applicant. This is what they have said to us, is it will be a changing places facility to provide that level. What that actually entails, hopefully they can just confirm what that exactly extends to.
John, Councillor Field.
Just one more minor one. Paragraph 8.1 talks about flood zone 3 and then goes on to talk about flood zone 3B. I'm not familiar with the difference. Could someone enlighten me?
So the flood zone 3 gets divided by ourselves as the local planning authority rather than the Environment Agency into 3A and 3B. Essentially 3B is functional floodplain, so the expectation is 3B would flood and needs to provide for that. So the understanding we have with the Environment Agency following various discussions with them is we should expect this site to flood, and therefore how do we mitigate for that? Would this be appropriate? And we've had that conversations with the Environment Agency and has said that's why the proposal has got that increase in the floor level to lift it above potential flood level and then provide for the flood to go underneath of the building. Does that?
So it's once every 2 or 3 years sort of thing, not once every 200 or 300 years.
Yeah, potentially it's more regular than the once in 100 years, or with climate change differences, it's more likely to flood. It is part of the functional floodplain.
But you have taken the climate change differences into account, I presume?
Yep, so we've run this all past the Environment Agency because initially they were concerned and we had their objection, a holding objection. We've gone through various discussions with them, and I know the flood risk consultant from the applicant has discussed that in detail with the Environment Agency, as have I, and then we've had this subsequent agreement from the Environment Agency that they were content with what the mitigation provides for.
Thank you. Any other questions? So this hasn't got any BREEAM status or anything like that?
No, it is what has been offered for this building, offering something with low impact on this site, both in terms of the design and materials and putting forward a variety of measures for it. But no, it hasn't got any specific status, primarily because of its small floor space. We'd only normally seek that over 1,000 square metres. Policy terms, but they have offered a reasonable package and we have secured that by way of condition.
Any other questions? No? Okay, so we'll move on. We don't have the Town Council here. We don't have an objector or a supporter, but we do have the applicant, Daniel Hughes. Would you like to come up? And take the front, and you have 3 minutes, and we have a timer here, and we do ask you to keep to the 3 minutes, please.
Good morning. Having reviewed the planner's assessment of the application and the committee report, I'm very comfortable that the officer has captured all aspects of the project. Needham Lake is a really exciting project to be involved with, but it's also a feel-good project. We, as a design team, acknowledge that Needham Lake is a heavily visited destination, predominantly for its beauty and wildlife. It's therefore not surprising that the council and local community want the visitor centre to be sympathetic to its surroundings, and that's what we strive to do. The proposed aesthetics of the building are in harmony with the lake. The building is predominantly timber by structure and cladding, and as such provides a natural and organic visual. Many of the materials used and operational ethos within the building lean towards that of more of a sustainable solution. The designers also listened. In 2018, the council issued a questionnaire which called for the community's opinion of what the new visitor centre should be. The output of that questionnaire proved to be a valuable briefing document which was at the heart of our project as we moved forwards. Initial concept designs were then presented at a public engagement event in October this year, where the proposals were very much appreciated. We have listened to the request for a changing places toilet, and that's since been incorporated, and I think the team acknowledged that's the right thing to do. We've listened to those who like to use the lake for dog walking, and we've incorporated a course extension to the building so that those with dogs can still benefit from the facilities of the centre. The centre has been designed to not be limited to any single use, and it is adaptable and it can evolve through changing needs and changing community demands. We feel that the design responds well to the brief we were given and is a fitting conclusion to all the design iterations that we've undertaken. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Mansell, do you want to go first with your question?
Well, I wanted to ask about the efficiency of the solar panels, given that the roof is facing slightly northwards. And I'd also like to ask, was there ever any consideration of rainwater harvesting for use in the toilets?
Okay, so on the solar panels, yeah, we acknowledge, you're right, that it's facing the wrong way, effectively. We're currently in the process of firming up that design, so we're going through the detailed design part of that at the moment. So I think within that process, we will naturally lean towards ways to make it more efficient. That will include framing solutions to lift it off, so it changes the angle. Whilst the roof angle is one way, we can have frames on there to angle it the other way. We're also looking at the technology of the solar panels. Some work better in slightly shaded areas. I do acknowledge that an overall limitation is that it is still facing the wrong way, so it will have a natural benefit in the summer more than the winter, but we are doing all we can to make it as efficient as possible for the solar. Rainwater harvesting was considered, and I don't think it's completely off the table. We looked at various ways of treating the grey water matter coming out from a toilet and indeed all waste. One of the options is so that the site initially has limitations over accessibility to drainage. So we looked at keeping drainage and arisings on site and dealing with those, but being in a floodplain, the likelihood of flooding, we've had to compromise the aspirations in that regard to what we can actually do. And if a flood does happen, what happens to local watercourses? So I don't think it's off the cards, and indeed I saw one of the draft conditions is probably that of a water butt. So we can definitely explore that. And I think the brief we've received from the council as our client is to make this building as sustainable as possible within certain parameters. So I think as a comment, we'll definitely explore that.
Anyone else? I've got a comment. Yeah, Councillor Muller.
Chair, it's just basically to repeat the previous question I asked to Gemma. Bearing in mind what the Mid-Suffolk Disability Forum have said about the changing places facility, which I welcome, would it be possible to equip that with a hoist and an adult-sized changing bed for severely disabled people to use?
Yes, is the answer. So we are looking at fully complying with the changing places category, which includes a hoist, a changing bed, a shower. We're going to include that as an optional thing, but we are looking to include that, as well as those physical features to comply with changing places. It's about the set out and the layout of that as well, so it allows carers to operate, so the bed's in the middle, and as we're setting that out, so yes is the answer. We're looking to fully comply with the changing places.
Yeah, Councillor Field, then Councillor Eburn.
Largely been covered, the issue of the solar panels. I was just going to point out that clearly to get a reasonable output, they've got to point at the sun when it's somewhere between the equator and the northern tropic, Capricorn is that. And you know, that's a fixed and known number, so one knows what angles they need to be at. It's fixed by God or physics or someone. And the pictures don't show that. I'm very happy with most of the pictures, but it's just a matter of these are a bit deceptive. If someone thinks that the solar panels are going to be that unobtrusive, then they're kidding themselves. So it's a matter of perception that concerns me a bit. What's your view on that?
No, you're quite right. We don't want to add on these technologies which are intended to be a sustainable feature at the detriment of the overall design intent. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that at the moment. We're going through the process. But I'm happy for that to be fed back to the officer as we evolve that design if there's a need for that to be undertaken. But there will definitely be, from the designer's perspective, there'll definitely be an ambition to not allow the solar panels to influence too far the design intent and visuals that we've created.
Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. I'm concerned about the lighting at the site, and particularly during winter months. And obviously, we want to have as darker skies as possible. So, how can we be sure that, I know there's conditions around lighting, but that is the most efficient and ensures that we have the darkest skies possible in that location? Thank you.
Okay, so we have to compromise, I suppose, between lighting required for ease of access and safe access, and the safe management of the building once it's in operation. Taking that forwards, we can liaise with the design team, the electrical engineers who are currently in the process of designing out that technical aspect, and we can start considering things like timers, so if they're only on in operational hours, we can start considering the angles of them, that they are there to illuminate paths, not wider illumination, so we can start being more specific. For now, we just have a design intent, which is what was submitted, and the next few weeks are really finessing that. So we can take that away as quite useful feedback, and I'll filter that back if that's okay.
A couple of questions from me, if I may. What is the lifetime of the building? And when you have designed it, have you thought about keeping the running costs as low as possible, as it's a council asset?
First part of that question, I will ask over here in a minute, see if he knows. I honestly don't know the lifetime, but the second part, absolutely. So the building, talking about sustainability, generally, there's many ways you can tick sustainability boxes, but what we tried to do in the first instance is design sustainability from the heart of the project. So we start looking at fabric-first approaches. So bolt-ons are secondary to installing things that really are sustainable in their own right. So that's why we've gone for timber, it's sustainably sourced, it's low maintenance in its own right. We haven't got air conditioning. We're opting to design in a stack system cooling, which is where the building physics cools at night. So there's high up windows, and they will expel warm air overnight, allow cool air to come in. It's quite a common feature in Europe. So we're looking at those kind of things, which will in turn reduce maintenance costs. It will induce peak load. So air conditioning is quite heavy on energy consumption. All of those features, so our aspirations for it to be a sustainable building are then rippling through to the ongoing maintenance and management of that, and they will be very efficient boilers that are put in. For example, an air source heat pump is going to be used to primarily heat the building. Those kind of features for sustainability. Do you know what lifespan?
The structure is going to be the 60-year kind of standard.
Yeah.
Some things were replaced earlier. The roof membrane usually guarantee of 30 years.
Okay.
The 30-year. You're planning for at least 30 years.
So the roof is on a 30-year, and that kind of aligns with most warranties that you get from installers. Frame is around 60 years. There's not then a lot in the building, so you've got your internal partitions, which might need more decorative maintenance as you go along.
That's fine. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't sort of a 10-year porter cabin design. Councillor Mansell.
Sorry, I've thought of another question, and perhaps this is a bit of a personal question, really. 10 cycle storage spaces are proposed. I can't see them on the plans, but what I can see is a bike leaning up against the pillars. So I just wondered where on your section buildings, I just wondered where the bike racks were going to go.
Yeah, that's probably just design intent. Gone mad. But I believe, from memory, they're between the proposed centre location and the current car park, and there'll be a number of parking bike hoops there.
Okay, I think that's all the questions. Thank you very much. So we have two ward members for Needham Market. The first is we have Councillor Norris and Councillor Phillips, so I'll do it in alphabetical order. So Councillor Norris first. I'm unable to attend Development Control Committee meeting next Wednesday. Please find my comments as a joint ward member in respect to this application. I'm wholly in support of this application as it is a facility that has been very much in demand for some time, with visitors to Needham Lake frequently asking where they can obtain refreshments, etc. There are many visits to Needham Lake by various groups, including school visits, who will benefit from the facilities that will be on offer. And it will further enhance Needham Lake, which I now understand is the most frequently visited free attraction in the eastern region. There is currently a feasibility study being undertaken on improving the access to Needham Lake and also to Needham Market town centre via the railway station subway. And if this is successful, it will not only improve the access to the visitors centre, resulting in higher footfall, but will also aid the local economy by increasing the viability of the shops on the high street. I'm therefore very much in favour of this project, and I'm pleased that Mid-Suffolk District Council has decided to go ahead with it. Councillor Mike Norris, Needham Market Ward. And then we also have a comment from Councillor Phillips. I'm unfortunately unable to attend the above Development Control Committee meeting on Wednesday the 11th of December, so please find my comments as the joint ward member. I'm wholly in support of this application. There are many visits to Needham Lakes by various groups, including school visits, who will benefit from the facilities that will be on offer. And it will further enhance Needham Lake, which I understand is now the most frequently visited free attraction in the eastern region. As my joint ward member Mike Norris has already stated, there is currently a feasibility study being undertaken on improving the access to Needham Lake and also to Needham Market town centre via the railway station subway. And if this is successful, it will not only improve the access to the visitor centre, resulting in higher footfall, but it would also aid the local economy by increasing the viability of the shops on the high street. I'm very much in favour of this project, and I'm pleased that Mr. Suffolk has decided to go ahead with it. Yours sincerely, Steve Phillips. So that's the information from the ward members. So we've had everything put to us, all the information up to us to discuss, debate and come to a conclusion. Who would like to go first? Councillor Warboys, you were first up, then Councillor Eva.
I think we've got a very elegant design proposal here. I think it would be an asset to Needham Lakes. I'm very happy to support it. There are a few concerns being raised about disability access and the probably intrusion into the design of the solar panels, but I think these are going to be resolved by the design team. So I think it's a very good proposal.
Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I too would be supportive of this application, and I think because it's something that Mid-Suffolk's doing, that we really need to be very, very careful in terms of the approach, particularly in terms of sustainability, so we can show not just the local community but the wider community how Mid-Suffolk are acting in terms of designing buildings out for the future. So I'd be happy to support it, but I very much want to see strong sustainability features being borne out during the build. Thank you.
Councillor Mounts.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to echo the comments from my colleagues. I think it's fantastic that Mid-Suffolk are developing this facility at Needham Lake. I'm looking forward to having a bike ride there and having a cup of coffee. So yes, I would very much like to support it, but I too, do want it to have the highest feasible sustainability features in the design, which is why I asked the questions about the solar panels and the rainwater harvesting. And I hope that the conditions that are imposed on the implementation of those sustainability features is going to make sure that we do have an exemplary facility, to show that look, we can have this low carbon usage coffee shop visitor centre at Needham Lake. So I'm very much in support of it. So I'll propose that we go along with the officer recommendation as long as we're happy with those conditions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Field.
Yes, I'm sure I support this. I have to say I live about 2 miles from here, so I'm sure I will visit it when it gets constructed. And all the benefits have been discussed. The only issue is that one about we're putting solar panels on there. You would want that to drive the heat pump on a good day. So they really have to be effective, not just there to be able to say that we've supplied them. So with that one caveat, I totally support this.
Do you want to second it?
If it hasn't been seconded,
No.
I'm more than happy to.
Fine. Anyone else wish to speak on this? Yeah, Councillor Mayor.
For fear of repeating what's been said, I'm worried about the solar panels. I think plonking them on top with a north-facing roof
is clumsy. The rest of the design is excellent. I don't see the need for a north sloping roof. So what concerns me slightly is the condition that we can apply to this to make sure that we don't get highly ranked panels on top that look as though they've just been plonked on top as an afterthought. Oh, we better do some sustainability. So I'm concerned about the design of that roof. Why does it need to be north facing?
Okay, anyone else wish to speak? No, so it's been proposed by Councillor Mansell and seconded by Councillor Field. And I think the recommendations that are on page 22 are quite light touch. They're sort of more headline, but I think it's very clear what members' instructions are. Do we need to elaborate a bit more just to get that in the wording? How do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, I think the reason they're fairly light touch is they're coming with the information up front, whereas quite often we don't get much information on planning applications up front, and therefore we condition all of it. So the majority of it is that they will implement what they've said to us. Noting members' concerns about the renewable energy is, rather than requiring them simply to implement what they've told us, if members would prefer a scheme to be submitted to us so that essentially the planning officers have final say, that would be a fairly minor change, but would give us a little bit of that control back if that's what members would be satisfied with.
And I think also the important point of picking up on the rainwater harvesting and what happens with that. I mean, it's been raised.
So an additional condition for rainwater harvesting scheme to be agreed?
To be agreed, yeah. Sorry, are you happy with that, Councillor Mansell and Councillor Field?
I am happy with a rainwater harvesting scheme to be investigated, because if there are issues with the water supply and the drainage and everything,
water table.
I don't think we can impose a condition that they must do it, but I think it should be looked into to see if it is feasible.
Yeah.
If there's words
to be
that
agreed.
effect. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if we use the wording to be agreed, if they were to submit to us as the planning authority a scheme that says we can't do it for these reasons, and we were satisfied that it would be a flood zone issue or whatever issue, we could agree that there wouldn't be a scheme, but then we would know that it has been considered. So just to confirm, so rather than implementation of the renewable energy scheme, that will be agreed.
To be agreed.
And then the rainwater scheme to be agreed if feasible.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, on that basis, it's been proposed by Councillor Mansell and seconded by Councillor Field. All those in favour of the recommendation with the additions on page 22 and the extra points that have just been made. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Now, the next item, yeah. Okay, we'll go straight on to 7B. This is planning application DC 1903-790 in Haughley. Stow Upland and Weatherden is the ward, and over to Catherine, who's going to present.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So this application is outline planning permission with all matters reserved save for access, which is to be considered for up to 29 dwellings within Haughley. So this is the constraints map. As you can see, the site is in sort of the top right-hand corner, just outside the settlement boundary. There are no real constraints, although it should be noted that there is a listed building just to sort of the southwest of the site here. This is a site in the context of, obviously, the settlement boundary. So the area shaded green on the slide shows the existing settlement boundary. It does go further west than, obviously, the slide. And this is just in area context. So you can see, obviously, all the built-up residential area and then the agricultural fields to the east. So this is a red line site location plan. The site is 1.28 hectares. This application has been supported by Haughley Parish Council on the basis that it is in the Haughley Parish Neighbourhood Plan, which was adopted in October this year. Under policy HAU 4, it actually specifically states, obviously, the land at Station Road, east of Millfields, is basically an area that they think should obviously have development, despite it being out of a settlement boundary currently. So this is just the proposal map for neighbourhood plan, which demonstrates the policy for that site. So within the current adopted local plan, it's outside the settlement boundary, and within the emerging draft joint local plan, which obviously is still under regulation 18 and has limited weight, it again would appear outside the settlement boundary. But the main highlight here is the fact that obviously Haughley have designated that site for development within their neighbourhood plan. So, as I stated previously, it is outline for all matters reserved other than access. However, we have got an indicative site layout, and it's understood that the reserved matters and obviously this outline, if recommended, if granted, would have a condition stating that the indicative layout will remain as demonstrated on this proposal. Here, this slide just shows you the layout within the context, obviously Millfields, which is to the west, and then the residential development to the south of the site. So here you've got just two properties facing onto obviously the street, and the blue shows a tree-lined avenue as you enter. You've got a group of properties that then overview into the green space. So you've got frontage aspects, and all the green space is monitored. The same down here in this corner of the site. And then you've got another slightly larger cluster, and then they're slightly more dispersed as you move out towards the countryside at the north of the site. Obviously, because of the agricultural fields to the north and the east, at the moment, again, as it's outline only, the landscaping hasn't been agreed or discussed in any detail, but it is noted that when the reserve matters do, come in, the northern and the eastern boundaries will need to have careful consideration as to how they're addressed. This just shows the access arrangement. The grey, the black dotted line is where they're proposing to put the new footpath. So at the moment, the footpath runs up to Millfields at the point of the arrow. This proposal would install a footpath along the front of the site, as well as connecting to the other side of the road. This then allows continuous footpath straight down into Haughley Centre. As you can see from obviously this, that all the services and the site would be here with a footpath that then joins up, and you can obviously walk straight down. This is a site photo approaching from the east as you head into Haughley. The site is just in the distance, roughly where this tree, and along here. That's just the frontage. So at the moment there is a hedgerow. It's not very tall. Most of it will probably be lost due to the access and visibility displays. However, hopefully reserve matters landscaping we can address and look to reinstate a green edge towards the front. And this is just an image of a neighbouring development to give it some context. So the recommendation is for approval subject to section 106 to secure the affordable housing, as well as transport costs for the primary school and also secondary school transport.
Thank you very much. Questions from members? Any at this stage? Yes, Councillor Field. Could you just turn your mic on?
Sorry. Yeah. It says, paragraph 3.4 says less than 800 metres from the centre of Haughley. Fourth one says approximately 375 metres from the centre of Haughley. The distance to the footpath says 30 metres in 3.4. It says 65 metres in 4.1. I had a feeling that over the page it says something different again. Perhaps I can't find that. I just wonder what the correct distances are.
I know to the footpath from Millfields is approximately, I think it's 10, no, it's not 10 metres, it's about 30 metres. I'm not sure on the others, bear with me 2 seconds.
So we don't really know. I'm sure they're all fairly short, but it's just documentation should be accurate. For instance, the 5.3 says the bus stop's 100 metres away in the centre of Haughley. So we have sort of 3 different figures within a page.
We will, yeah, I mean, obviously, we'll measure that, but obviously 3.4 and 4.1 contradict each other. We need to have that accurate. Yeah, it's not a big issue, but we should have it, the paper should all have one figure. And so we'll just measure that and we'll keep going with questions. Councillor Mansell?
Thank you. I've got a couple of queries. On both the indicative plan and
Okay, we're going to have to wait because there's one officer who's now desperately trying to get the distance, so just bear with us a sec. I thought if it was a general one, we might be able to cover it with other people. Does the local ward members have any inside information on the distance?
It's about 800 metres.
About 800 metres. Can we take that as given? You happy?
It's a good walk.
Yeah. Okay. I think we'll take that figure unless we hear otherwise. Yeah.
The bus stop is, obviously it's on Google Maps, so I'm not going to be 100% accurate. The distance from roughly where the site access is to the footpath on Millfields would be about 65, and then the bus stop is the opposite side of the road from Millfields. So you're looking at about 100 metres.
Okay, back to you, Councillor Mansell.
Thank you. On both the indicative plan layout and on page 116, which I believe is the response from strategic planning, there is a proposed housing mix. And whilst this is an outline application, is there any way that this means anything? Is all I'll say there. And my other question is on page 77, our list of conditions. Could you please enlighten me as to what renewal integration scheme is? On the bottom, right on the last bullet point on page 77.
Pick up on the housing mix while you look at the last one. So the housing mix in terms of the affordable units itself would be secured by the 106. In terms of the open market housing, there is a condition 1 up from the bottom on page 77, market housing mix prior to or concurrent with reserve matters to be agreed. So we would expect to secure that at that time.
So the last paragraph for page 77, the conditions, energy and renewal integration scheme to be agreed. That's things like obviously the electric vehicle charging points, because at the moment it's reserved matter outline only with only the access. There's no details of potentially any sustainable measures for the site. So it would be looking at including electrical charging points, potentially any solar gain and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never come across the term renewal integration. Is it an official term? Because I understand what you're saying when you've explained it to me, but I don't understand why that is called renewal integration. But that's just as an aside.
No specific reason why it's stated that. I could take it on board and next time just have a renewable energy system.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Councillor.
Swiftbot. Belmont. Swift boxes installation, hedgehog fencing, are they standard conditions? I'm glad they're there. Where have they come from?
They don't have to be standard conditions. It's partly because of the site location. In terms of to the north and the east, you do have agricultural fields. And again, it goes down to biodiversity and trying to almost not only mitigate, but enhance biodiversity in new developments. And so that's the reason for them.
Chair, there's also a Swift box scheme in Haughley. So they've been setting up Swift boxes throughout Haughley from the church and all the houses through the streets. So they've been encouraging Swifts for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's excellent, and perhaps it should be a standard condition in developments in villages.
Councillor Warboys.
I'm just seeking a little bit of clarification here. It's about the affordable housing. The actual percentage of affordable housing is obviously very important to this application, but there's the notes about the large proportion of larger dwellings, whereas the data for Haughley says that many properties are under occupied, and whether the affordable housing is integrated into the scheme and not placed in one area. And the third point, which is, it's page 116, is about suitable housing options for more elderly people. Is that a definite part of the planning application that those points are going to be adopted, or is it just an expression of a desirability for the affordable housing?
So through the section 106, we literally secure the numbers. So where it says at the bottom of page 116, sort of the mix, affordable rent, 4 2-bedrooms, 1 3-bedroom, that would be the part that is secured specifically through the 106. Through the reserved matters would be the location of those. So we would expect at that point it to be integrated across the site, have that mix, have the 10-year blindness through the site, but that would be part of reserved matters because it's design and layout. So we would have to come back to that specific part.
Any other questions? No? Okay. So we'll move on. We don't have any further comments apart from what's in the paper from the Parish Council. We don't have an objector, we don't have a supporter, we don't have the applicant, but we have the ward members. Councillor Eburn and Councillor Wellham.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's rather disappointing the applicant isn't here today. So, because for a while this site has been included in the neighbourhood plan, it's disappointing that the applicant hasn't actually engaged with the community prior to the application coming to a committee. And I'd hope that they would be here today, but they're not. But hopefully they will do so fully if this application is approved. There's a few issues that we've got with this outline application, and some of your questions have highlighted them so far. One is the housing mix, another is trees and open spaces, and the third is the entrance to the village. So dealing with the housing mix first, the indicative housing mix isn't representative of the housing need for Haughley. There's a need, as shown in your papers, for 1-bed housing, not for 5-bed housing. And I'm very concerned that this goes ahead with the current layout without that need for 1-bed housing being included in an indicative layout. I'd also like to see a condition that the affordable housing is for local need first, because we have got quite a considerable local need, and it's been shown that on previous sites within the village where it has gone for local need, they've developed their own community very quickly in those streets, and it's proven to work well. So I'd like to see the mix changed and removing the 4-bed and 5-bed homes. Within the indicative layout, there are also several areas of open space, and I think care needs to be taken about to ensure that these open spaces can be well managed. And given that this site is right on the edge of fields, and there is considerable hedgerow along the frontage and on the side of the site at the moment, that in order to improve the link to the countryside, those open spaces should include trees planted across the site. And finally, the 30-mile-an-hour zone is right on the edge of this site, at the edge of the close that's opposite Harvest Close. And so as such, you hit the 30 mile immediately at this site. And I think, given that highways haven't made any objections, something kind of surrounding sort of gateway treatment, sort of as the entrance to the village, needs to be done to sort of highlight that you're coming up to kind of a new development. And I'd like to see something to put in place to mitigate that. But with those three key areas, given that this site is in the neighbourhood plan and the village have said this is where they'd expect to see development, then I expect it would be approved. Thank you.
I think we ought to just pick up on the point, just so we don't get confused about the market housing mix, etc., because you've raised that. Can you just clarify for us exactly where we stand on that? Because if you look at the bottom of page 77, it does say market housing mix prior to or concurrent with reserved matters to be agreed.
That's right. So in terms of what we're looking at today is outlined for up to 29. So that is the extent of what we are saying yes to, is that they could put up to 29 houses on there. The actual mix, the layout design, that is all for later, and that condition specifically means that they will have to come and agree the mix with us, so that at that point we can consult our housing colleagues and say, okay, yep, they've achieved what we would need them to, or actually, no, they've gone in for all massive houses, that's not appropriate. So that would be for that condition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Chair, but it does say on the third bullet point of the condition, layout shall broadly conform to that shown on the illustrative drawing. So, you know, we're either agreeing kind of roughly what's there or not.
It's broadly in terms of obviously the green space and the layout. In terms of where the actual affordable houses go, there's no specific designation in this. And ultimately, I mean, you know, if that condition isn't put on, it can change, but it was more that most people and the council seemed to support what was in front of them, the parish council, and therefore it was considered that this would be appropriate going forwards. But the final design will obviously evolve, hopefully, with the reserve matters.
Sorry to bring that. I just wanted us to be clear what we're agreeing today. So should we just hear from Councillor Wellham, and then we'll take all the questions at the end. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Parish Council have supported this application, and I support the principle of it, but I've got a few concerns. One of those is that the properties opposite the site are bungalows and they are slightly lower land. So I wonder if we could ask the developer to consider putting bungalows at the front of their site, when that comes through on the details of reserve matters. There's a number of small areas of open space on there which are a concern to me, because one larger area rather than lots of little bits would be more useful. There could be difficulties with managing little bits of open space, so there needs to be some care thought about any approval of these lots of little bits, that there will be a proper management scheme for them. And the area, potentially the larger area of public open space at the front, I'd like to see some trees there. Not huge trees because of the bungalows opposite, but some smaller trees perhaps, fruit trees with some Suffolk varieties of apple and so on. Yeah, the affordable housing, I think Rachel's already mentioned the concerns about that. I see that on the drawing, which is page 124, there's a reference to 4 number 1 bedroom apartments, and yet that's not a recommendation from page 71. There seems to be a bit of mismatch there, where the officer is saying that there's a need for 1 and 2 bedroom dwellings. There are 20 applicants with local connections, half of them looking for 1 bedroom accommodation, and then suggests a slightly different mix of housing, of affordable housing. So I'd like to see that those one bedroom properties do come forward for affordable rent. A couple of other concerns. One is, it's a matter to be considered in the future, and that is that this site could be being developed at the same time as 2 other housing sites in Haughley, and it's important that all 3 are taken into account when discussing a construction management plan. And I just wondered if there is any potential for off-road pedestrian route towards the school and to the town, to the village centre, if that could be considered at some point. But on the whole, I support the application, as have the Neighbourhood Plan Working Group, the village and the parish council. Thank you.
Okay, I think this is an important point. So can someone share that with the committee?
Okay, so the figures you were looking at within the actual committee report on page 116, roughly, they're the comments from our strategic housing department. So that's what they're specifying or suggesting needs to be put forward, obviously in the section 106. In terms of what's being provided in the PowerPoint presentation at the back with the indicative site layout, that is merely the agent's suggestion of what they might be bringing forward. It doesn't mean that that's what they will do. It will be up to obviously what's negotiated and down into the section 106.
So the strategic housing at Mid-Suffolk has not gone for the 10 that are shown on page 124, but have gone for the 7 that's on 116. That's what our housing team is saying is needed for the village.
Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
Chair, there's an inconsistency between what the statements made by the strategic housing manager and there's no logic to having come up with that particular mix, because in paragraph 4.2 on page 116 she says that the current registered need for affordable housing in Haughley is 20 applicants with local connection, with over half looking for one-bedroom accommodation, and then her recommendation does not include any one-bedroom accommodation. So it would appear that the suggestion put forward, or the current registered need, had been taken into account by the applicant, but not by the strategic housing manager.
Let's pick up on that. Good point.
So I'm more than happy we can take that away and confirm that with our strategic housing, that what the actual mix they definitely want is having regard to the fact that there is this one-bedroom requirement, and that we'll retake that advice, and that will be on the basis of which we then follow through with the section 106 agreement. We'll confirm that if members are happy for us to do that.
Yeah, but on the basis that the application is for the erection 29 houses with 10 affordable, but the mix to be confirmed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any? Yes, Councillor Mansell. Any other?
Yes. Thank you.
We're really on questions still.
Yes, I'm asking questions about the because it was mentioned by, I think it was Councillor Eburn, about the boundary treatment, and I just wondered, do we have a picture of the existing gateway into the village from that direction to see what it looks like now? Because obviously you're going to bring the housing forward, and I wondered what it looked like now. I can't quite visualise it.
We do, we're just bringing it up. Maybe. Slide 16 when it does work. Yeah.
We're getting there. It's technology. Councillor Field.
They're just trying to get in the queue. Not disturb the comment.
It's coming by fax.
I've got a very small one on a...
Sorry.
So that's the site more or less where the trees are. So that's Millfield in the distance on the right-hand side, but this predominantly, if it's going to work, is the site here, and there'll be a footpath coming along. So there's hedgerow at the moment, which will obviously remain along here, but it will be quite visual, potentially, depending on obviously any landscaping that comes in at a later stage.
Okay. So the point that's been made about coming into the village and the landscaping, when would that be secured? Yeah, but that's what I'm just asking. When would that be conditioned, now or on the?
It's probably, well, you can secure some of it by condition, but in terms of reserved matters, that would probably be when it comes forward, and hopefully almost discussion prior to a reserved matters application where we can work with the agent to secure a scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Field.
I think it was really that last point. We've got conditions on swift boxes and hedgehogs. Can't we add one on boundary treatment to be agreed with some sort of comment to replace the existing hedgerows? Is it there, sorry? I'm sorry, I didn't read that.
It is in the conditions, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's already covered.
And what about the village gateway that the local members were requesting? Is that possible to add that at some point?
So I think a bullet point on the, we just want the as it's the entrance to the village, to be further details to be provided, something like that. Can we have a condition that that's, I don't know how we word it, I'll leave that to you.
Okay.
But something along the fact that it is the entrance point to the village. I mean, it's not in the middle of the village, it's the entrance point. So that's going to be it's important that that's well choreographed for the people driving in. They see what's happening. Okay, any other? Yes, Councillor Warboys.
Just on, well, for me, a final question. On the constraints map, there's an overhead power line running diagonally across the site, which is no doubt why perhaps it was excluded from the original plans for development. How would this be taken into account by the development?
I mean, there'd be various options in terms of undergrounding, moving it, and that would be up to them at that point. If that power line is still there and we come in for reserved matters and it goes across the houses, therein is a whole other issue that we would have to then consider at that point, whether that were to be appropriate. But I think given the location of this site, there should be other options that the developer could explore to move, alter it, as it underground it, find an alternative to allow that layout to go forward. But said if it weren't to have happened or be resolved at the point of reserved matters, that would be a consideration, and we would have to make that view of whether the layout would be appropriate having regard for the power line.
So basically it'll come back and they'll have to have a solution or no solution, but then that would be before members when it next come back, and be for us to determine whether that's appropriate or not. Any other questions? No. Okay, so we've had all the information put before us. We've heard from the ward members. Thank you both for joining us today, and it's over to us to discuss, debate and come to a conclusion on this. Yeah, Councillor Field.
I thought it quite refreshing to come to an application that actually is in line with the neighbourhood plan rather than adverse to it. That we've got a layout which there's an agreement that what is achieved should broadly conform to that. So we're not agreeing a load of make-believe. It's something that's reasonably well defined. There do seem to be these requirements, okay, on boundaries, swift boxes, etc., things that people are concerned about. And there seems to be sufficient flexibility to perhaps to agree the housing mix as we go forward in accordance with local requirements. I have to say I personally am always a bit concerned about too many one-bedroomed houses, because that's driven perhaps by the bedroom tax, which could well evaporate fairly shortly. So, but nevertheless, that's what the current position is. And we do have energy renewal integration schemes, so it does seem that this is in line with what we need and what the local population requires. So on that basis, I support it, and I actually would propose approval.
Thank you for that, Councillor Field. Yes, Councillor Mansell.
Thank you. I am really pleased that we have both energy sustainability and rainwater harvesting mentioned in the conditions, and I really hope that this is the way we're going to go forward as a council, because it's fantastic that we are mentioning it in our list of conditions. So I'm really pleased to see that. I too am refreshed by the fact that here we have an application that the Parish Council and the Neighbourhood Plan are supporting, albeit it is outside of the existing red line, and it's not even in our proposed, our draft joint local plan as part of the settlement boundary, but it does seem like a fairly logical extension to the village, and I share Councillor Wellham's comment about the off-road walking route, because I know there is a sort of unofficial footpath along the back of that site, and it would be great if that could be sort of incorporated. It does look like in the indicative layout there is a bit of open space up there, so that it's not like it's attached to somebody's private garden. And I think so long as we can tighten up the whatever it's called, boundary treatment on that exposed entrance to the village, because it is like at the top of the hill, and you're coming down from, you come down and you see Haughley, and then you go down the hill into the centre of the village. So it is going to be quite prominent. So as long as that bullet point about the landscaping, making sure that that's right. And I agree with Councillor Field that we do have some flexibility about making sure the housing mix is right. So I'm prepared to second Councillor Field's proposal.
Thank you very much. Just before we go on, as it's now been proposed a second, I'm just going to get that bullet point read out regarding the entrance to the village that we'd add to the recommendations.
Yep, thank you. I wanted to run through that. So we've got the recommendation on page 77 that we are also agreeing the mix of affordable housing. There is also the travel costs that the officer had mentioned earlier for school travel costs to be added to 106, and then we'll also be looking to seek an additional condition for a scheme to be agreed for the village entrance point. Does that cover what members were seeking?
I think that's fine. Okay, does anyone else? Yes, Councillor Mayor.
I am slightly concerned that the developers haven't engaged with the village. They haven't turned up today. Is there anything we can do to make sure that when further detail comes back, we actually get a chance to talk to the... No. Okay.
I'm afraid it's their prerogative.
Right.
Not ours. Although we always encourage all developers to engage fully with the community, because you get a better application, you get better engagement, you get better buy-in, and actually here, this is the opportunity for them to discuss what they're proposing, and it's a good opportunity to showcase their application. So it is disappointing they have chosen not to, I agree. Anyone else wish to speak? No? Okay, so it's been proposed by Councillor Field and seconded by Councillor Mansell, as per the recommendations on page 77 and 78 of our papers, with the additional points that Gemma's has touched on. All those in favour of the recommendation? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. I propose we start again at 5 to 11, just for a comfort break. If that's okay with everyone. So, welcome back everyone. The next application before us is DC 19-03191 in I. Over to Master to present. I've gone on the wrong one. I'm very sorry.
We're still at I, sir.
We're still in I. Sorry, yeah, 7D. The next application is DC 19-03834. Also in I, and over to you, Master.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So this application is also situated in I. Is it this one? That's it. Thank you. This application is for a Section 73 variation of 2 conditions of the original plan application, which was approved in 2017. The 2 conditions restricted the public access to the touchdown offices. The offices are owned by Mid-Suffolk District Council and is used by officers every day from 8 in the morning till 8 in the evening. The current application varies the conditions to allow for public access between 9 and 3 in the afternoon, 3 days a week on Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays. I'll give you one moment to just have a read. The application is situated in I, outside of the conservation area. No heritage issues were identified. As you can see, the flashing light shows the location of the touchdown office. It is within the residential cul-de-sac, taken close. No parking has been proposed as part of this application, same as the previous approval. There are, however, 2 public car parks near to the site within walking distance. This is just the context of the site and where it is. So the two hatched red line outlines the public car park. The officers currently use these car parks. For the future, for the members of the public, this is also applicable. That's the location of the office in relation to the public car park. As you can see, it's a small office. There's limitations to the number of people who could visit at each given time, and officers consider that given the clear public and social benefits in us working in collaboration with the Town Council, this should be approved. It is within the walking distance. It is intended for the people in I, so it's for the local people to use this office. And these are some photos of the site. There will be some increase in pedestrian movement. There will be no vehicle movements increased in the close. But in terms of amenity of the neighbours, officers consider that this will not be significant as to raise any issues in terms of amenity. There's no intensification in terms of operation, no businesses have been proposed, so there's a limited number of people in controlled manner, in controlled hours of 3 days a week, between certain hours, who would be coming to the office to see the Town Council and the Town Clerk. So, based on the information given to you members, we consider that this should be approved. The font is too small, but I hope you can read it. So basically, the only difference between the previous approval is just to allow for public access 3 days a week between 9 and 3 in the afternoon. Thank you.
Just quickly pick up on something in the recommendation, which is we've reiterated the time limit in condition 2 unnecessarily on page 172. We've got it in twice, and that shouldn't be part of the recommendation. So we've got the section 73 time limit, which is fine, but condition 2 then gives them another 3 years. So I would suggest we just remove bullet point 2. Massa, would you just double check? So if you look at page 172, 1 is fine, and then 2 you reiterate it, essentially, giving them a fresh 3 years, which that wouldn't be what we'd need to do.
Okay.
Happy with
Apologies.
that?
Yes, please.
Yep.
Please ignore that.
No,
that's fine.
Thanks.
Okay, any questions? Yes, Councillor Field and Councillor Eban.
Sorry, since my memory's gone a little since I last sat through this particular application in 2017, was it? I just wondered whether you could refresh my memory as what sort of residents are there in the housing that surrounds this particular ex-common room for a sheltered housing scheme? So is there, do you have any particular different characteristics to the majority of I, perhaps, might be a thing? And when you've answered that, you certainly, our particular staff can be told very clearly to go park somewhere else rather than in this particular close. How will you control the behaviours of the people who are visiting the town council or our own operating people?
Well, as I understand, the town council would operate how they operate, but they clearly have I'm led to believe that people are aware that there is no parking available within the close, and I have included the previous committee report in the bundle, which explains the issues of parking previously. It was extensively explored, and it was resorted that the resolution was for everyone to be parking at the public car park. And like I said, there's limited number of people who would be attending the office at each given time, given the size of the office and hours of operation and days of the operation. But as far as I know, there's no change in the parking at all.
Peter, as the living in I and the ward member, do you want to tell us anything more on the question that's been asked?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the impact of this application now, when we're talking about allowing public access, but actually we're talking about 1 to 3 visitors a week visiting the office. So it's not it's very marginal impact in terms of the number of people. You've got for the office in operation 3 days a week, where you would have one person there most of that time, and as the officer has said, it's very close to off-street parking, so that's what I would expect to happen. I can certainly talk to the clerk to make sure that happens, but I know that will be the case. In terms of your first question, I know that this is part of a review of sheltered accommodation. It's before my time as a councillor, yes, and you, failing memory or not, will probably know more about that than I do. What I would say is part of the context here. We are, the town council is working with officers from Mid-Suffolk, Labour Mid-Suffolk, to look at, in the longer term, alternative accommodation for office and perhaps some other services as well that would allow, in the longer term, I know it's not part of this proposal, these premises to be returned to some kind of residential use.
I'm going to veer us off that because we can only look at what's before us.
Yes, so I'm trying to... Yeah.
Okay, thank you. John, you want to come back with another question?
Just to come back, you may have noticed from the previous record that I did propose refusal of this originally, and my concerns were that this is a sheltered housing scheme and they often accommodate vulnerable people. The guy I was sitting next to last night at a sheltered scheme, or yesterday, was 97. They're elderly people with some concerns, And there is, so you don't want
Okay, let's not get into
uncontrolled
debate.
people to visit.
Yeah, let's not get into debate.
Sorry, it's a debate. Yes,
yeah,
you're
let's not
right.
get into the debate. It's just
It's
questions about the
question
presentation.
was really, is it still a sheltered scheme? We have been closing those down in a way, or the ones that are out in the sticks have been less used for sheltered accommodation. It might by now be just ordinary council tenants, and that was really the gist. Are we aware it's a sheltered
Someone
scheme?
answer,
Is it still
what is
operational?
the housing now?
To the best of my knowledge, some of the properties have been de-sheltered as part of their earlier strategy and have council tenants in them, and some are still used as sheltered provision. That's as I understand it.
So it's mixed as you understand it. Okay. Councillor Mansell, did you have your hand up?
I did.
Sorry, Councillor Eburn, then you.
Thank you, Chair. I was also going to raise the issue of parking because you wouldn't, to get to that close, you'd drive down it and you would park outside, half on the pavement and half in the road. So, that's what people will do. They won't park in the car park and walk there. So, that needs to be considered. So I was going to raise, say, where is the parking, but also, do we consider lone working as well at this point, given it's a council property?
I think, it's not us, it's down to the town council. It's for them to consider. And I would have to say that, I don't think this is debate, but the town council is requesting this to run their scheme, and if the town council suddenly realised there's a parking problem, I would think the town council would be the first one to hopefully get on top of it and resolve it, would be my guess. But Councillor Mansell.
Thank you. I'd like to, first of all, comment on page 167, where we have our reason for reference to committee, and it doesn't mention the fact that it's owned by Mid Suffolk in there, and I think perhaps it should. And my other query is a bit related to the other queries about parking, and I just wonder if there's any scope for putting something that you can lock your bike to, because I believe all public buildings should have somewhere to lock your bike to, and I've just looked at that photograph and there's not even a railing. To try and encourage people not to park down there. If they actually could cycle, they're going to go in for 10 minutes, lock their bike to a railing or a bike rack would be fantastic.
I think we can add that if that's what's proposed and seconded. The idea is people in I walk to the town council. You would hope, but anyway. That's for them. Councillor, anyone else wish to...
Should the Mid Suffolk owned buildings be in that reason for reference?
Yep.
Yes, I would tend to agree. I don't know why that wasn't picked up. This is Mid Suffolk. Is there another reason that it was brought, or is that just a technical?
No, that's just a technical mishap.
Apologies for that. We'll make sure we pick that up in future.
There isn't a parish council in I. There's a town council. So, in fact, the wording on that, reasons for reference, is wrong for multiple reasons.
It does look like it's not been edited out.
Yeah.
So that's our technical approach. Apologies. Thank you for flagging that up.
Okay, anyone else wish to speak? Nope. So it's now over to us to discuss, debate and come to a conclusion. Oh, I'm sorry, Peter. God, you've come all this way. I'm so sorry. Because you've spoken, I've lost my train of thought. Peter, over to you as the ward member. Sorry.
I'm used, Chair, to...
I'm very sorry.
Thank you. This is an application that's been said by the town council. Given what's said about the building being in the ownership of Mid Suffolk, whether it's who are effectively the landlord, an admirable bit of enterprise then to get the town council to pay for the planning application, but that's not a relevant matter here. The town council has to leave its current accommodation on the 20th of December. Where it is at the moment, it's been taken over by Home Start. It needs to be accommodated. Been talking to officers at Mid Suffolk for some time now about the possibility of this these premises being used to accommodate the town council. There are benefits for that, not least in terms of encouraging a closer working between the town and the district. The impact of this, I think, is marginal. So you're talking about, most of the time, one person working there 3 days a week. Number of public visits, as I said, there it is not great. One, perhaps up to 3 people a week, typically, to pay for allotment or whatever it might be, and the odd councillor visiting to see to visit the clerk. So the impact. It is actually quite heavily used at the moment by officers of this council as a touchdown place. I know that the building control officer for the area uses it virtually daily. So it has quite a lot of officer use already. So I think there'll be rare moments when the town clerk would be the only person working on the site. In terms of the point about bicycles, there is a very handy and secure lobby as part of the entrance to the building where I would think a bicycle or two could be securely accommodated while people are there or visiting. The point is that we all have a concern about the provision of sheltered accommodation and the need that gives rise to that. I know, again, not germane to what's before us, but the upcoming neighbourhood plan for Eye makes a very considerable provision within that plan for sheltered housing for the town. Really, Chair, that's all I have to say. Happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you. My apologies again for missing you out. Any questions at all? Yeah, Councillor Mansell.
Thank you for picking up my query about cycle parking facilities. And I'm intrigued about the use of the lobby, because if I was just a member of the public visiting a parish council office, I wouldn't dream of bringing my bike inside a building unless there was a nice sign saying cycle storage available inside. So I still think it might be preferable if we can have a railing outside, but unless of course you're fancy everyone wheeling their bikes into some office that may or may not be quite overcrowded.
I mean, it's a good point on this bicycle. I'm just asking who would pay for it, because I doubt iTown Council. I don't know where that goes. Is that just something we could ask is looked at rather than
informative or whatever you call it, you mean?
Yeah.
I think that would be preferable, because looking at the red line, it's drawn very tightly around the building, and the implications of a condition might be problematic, yes. But an informative that we can put that under review would seem appropriate.
Thank you. Yes, so any other questions for the ward member? We're still in that. Yep, Councillor Field.
Yes, just could you refresh my memory? How big is Eye as a town? I've forgotten. How big is it? Is it 2,000 population around there?
At the moment, it's 2011 census, 2,154 people.
Any other questions? No. Okay, well, thank you for that, Peter. So we now move into discussion, debate, and to reach a conclusion on this. Who would like to kick off? Councillor Field.
Sort of try and repeat the things I said last time around. Obviously, this is a use of a building which is semi-redundant. I think it's not used. Its use as a common room stopped some time ago. So there were clearly good aspects to this, and I guess the town council does need a limited amount of accommodation. The concerns I really have are that it is in a sheltered scheme, and a lot of people there are vulnerable. In various ways, ways that you just don't want too many people wandering around, and certainly don't want people driving cars and parking them outside. It disturbs the residents. One doesn't obviously want to overplay that too much, but you do get, they are the class of people who are affected by various brands of rogue traders quite often, and so keeping such individuals well away is a good idea. We do all have a safeguarding responsibility. So I guess that is the real issue that concerns me significantly in extending this sort of use. When we agreed the past planning application, it was on the basis that we didn't allow the general public, who obviously vary widely in characteristics, to use the accommodation. We just allowed council officers, which are clearly under our control, and reasonable individuals. Certainly, the sheltered accommodation, there's several bits in my county division, and the police have been making great points about it being open plan and that it should have boundary walls and gates and God knows what else to keep these people isolated. And here we're actually encouraging additional risk, if you like to put it that way. So, I personally am against this use. I'm not convinced that there's no other alternatives. One accepts, as I say, the use by the clerk himself. I'm sure is a responsible individual. Not so much a problem. Someone who's going to drive in, leave their car temporarily, visit, and someone of unknown characteristics, I think is a risk that I personally wouldn't want to take.
Yeah, fine. I'd love to come back, but I don't want to lead from the chair, so I'll leave others first, and I'll come up. Councillor Eburn, then Councillor Miller.
Thank you very much, Chair. Before I start, can I just have a plea that we have correct planning papers? This is the third application today when we've got things that aren't correct. So, for example, page 189 refers to a planning application in Norton. So, in a school close in Norton, which we're not looking at. We're looking at a close enough.
On what page?
189. The minutes from the meeting.
There's some Norton, not I.
I hadn't even noticed that. Yeah.
So could I just have a, and previous application we had incorrect figures for distances, and the previous one we had, just really, please, can people double check these applications before we get them and put the correct information in? But having said that, given that this is something that I, Town Council, have asked for, I would assume, therefore, that they've considered fully all the implications. One of my slight concerns, actually, is that these sort of touchdown points, when we originally said we were going to move offices and have a head office, we weren't going to have any sort of the outlying kind of what are now called touchdown points seem to now be used extremely heavily, and so my concern would be just that you've got lots of Suffolk officers queuing up to kind of work there, and the desks are taken up by Town Council. So just need to be sure that that space is managed well, and obviously there's nothing here about how the space is going to be managed, and whether I is paying for a quarter of the space or how it's working out. But I would just ask that that's really carefully considered, and especially if officers, say from Mid-Suffolk, are arranging to meet someone from the public there, to building control meeting a developer, obviously that's outside those hours. And I do slightly agree with my colleague, Councillor Field, that there will be traffic down that road of individuals going down the road and through a sheltered accommodation. So I do have a slight concern about that, but overall, given that I, Town Council, have asked for it, I would be supportive of it. Thank you.
Can we just touch on about the public access?
Yeah, well, yes, the office is used regularly. It's not used heavily. So there's only 1 or 2 officers at a time who attend the office. Like I said, there's so much of scope for that office. It's a smaller space. However, we have been in discussion with regards to how the space will be subdivided, and that's forthcoming. Okay. So we have considered all the aspects before we came to this conclusion. So I just wanted to make that point clear. And also, for the town council, for the town council and the officers to be able to work, even if, like you said, there's a confidential meeting that is, being held in the office, and ensuring that there are no conflicts, so to speak. But that's forthcoming. So,
Councillor Muller.
Chair, I'm certainly listened to what Dr. Councillor Field, Councillor Eben has said, but I'm pretty certain that Town Council will have a risk assessment undertaken before there's any lone working in the premises, purely just for health and safety, someone's taken ill, an individual, etc. But as there are several people working there anyway, I don't think that'd be, well, the risk is going to be pretty low. And the fact that you've already said that there's only perhaps 2 or 3 visitors a week. So personally, I am supportive of this application, so I will be supporting it.
No one else has got their hand up. So I'm the same as Councillor Muller. I mean, we talk about public sector sharing space. We talk about having a one public sector estate. We talk about working better together. This, to me, is exactly what we should be doing with our buildings, get better usage, and this is a really good example. I mean, Town Council has always been very much at the forefront of looking after the residents of and I'm absolutely sure if they thought there was any threat to the sheltered housing or anything else like that, they would have thought about that and would have thought about maybe trying to find another venue if they felt there was a threat. So, you know, I have confidence. I am just going to come back, I'm afraid, to the papers. You know, we have had a series of papers today that are all wrong, and we need some way of checking it because, you know, we can't have opening paragraphs on reference to a committee. That cannot be wrong. The odd paper slipped in by mistake is fine, and we can't have recommendation. We can't have, you know, not knowing distances from the town to a site. That is just simple stuff. So we need to, can I, you know, actually put on the minutes that, you know, that needs, someone needs to look at the papers in detail. We shouldn't be picking up stuff like that, please. So no one else has spoken, so I'm happy to propose it, but I don't normally do that. But Councillor Haddingham, do you want to go?
That I'm sure Town Council have thought about this and you know, have done their risk assessments. So I'm happy to propose it.
Okay. Councillor Mansell, you're happy to second? No, I was going to say something else. Yep, by all means.
If I'm allowed to say that before it's seconded.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, with the concerns raised by some of my colleagues, is there any potential for making this a temporary permission, or does it have to be permanent?
You could decide to make it temporary, but you really need to be satisfied that there's a good planning purpose for doing so, and it's all right, you know, planning balance is in favour of that.
Yes, on planning, for planning reasons. Well, it's up to the committee.
If there are some concerns about the increased footfall and car usage down the close where the sheltered units are, is that not a planning reason that you want to monitor the amount of disturbance there is in that close? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's up to the committee to decide, but the town council, no resident and the ward member have not raised that as a concern at all. So if you feel it needs to be a concern, that's up to you when we come to vote, if you feel that way. Councillor Warboys.
I agree in the principle that has been raised about sort of putting our officers out into the communities and working at a distance. There's just this nagging thought at the back of my mind as to whether this is future-proof. I is destined to grow enormously over the next decade. There's already at times congestion in car parks and facilities within the town centre, and this site is very constrained. Whether there'd be a need for it to be moved to a larger premises in the future or not, or whether this allows for expansion, is to me a concern.
I'm afraid that's not what's before us today. That's not relevant to today's application. All we're being asked to decide is what's before us, which is the existing site becoming a facility for 3 afternoons a week. That's what we're being asked. If you want to comment on that, by all means you can, but it's not really, I'm being told that's not really relevant to the application. If it becomes outgrown, then they would have to put another planning application in to move it or to expand it. So it's been proposed by Councillor Haddingham. I don't have a seconder. Councillor Muller? Happy to second. So it's proposed as per the recommendation on page 172 with bullet point 2 taken out, but with an information note that appropriate bike storage is please considered. All those in favour of the recommendation? 7. Those against? 1. Okay. Thank you very much. And we now move on to Stowmarket, St Peter's, DC 1904869, and over to Harry to present the application.
Thank you very much, Chair. So here we have an application at the former Poundland site in Gipping Way in Stowmarket. It is a full planning application for the part change of use of an A1 unit to a gym, which falls under D2 use class, including alterations to the entrance door. So here is the site location plan. So it is located centrally within Stowmarket, with the station located to the east, just off the edge of the slide there. We have the constraints map showing that the site is located outside flood zone 2 and 3. It is not listed, however there is some listed buildings nearby. However, the heritage team have raised no objections to this proposal. So the site is located within the conservation area. However, obviously with it being existing, it's already there. The aerial map has the site there. Obviously, hatched is the element that is to be changed in its use. So it is a large retail unit with a large car park to the front. So the entire site has a square meterage of 1,145 square metres, and the existing car park to the front has 76 car parking spaces. Obviously with the block plan it shows the proposed unit being subdivided with alterations to the access there with the red arrow. The proposed gym unit is to take up 694 square metres of the unit, with the remainder being left in A1 use class. So we have the existing elevations and then the proposed elevations, obviously showing the external alterations, which include the insertion of bifolding doors to the front. The proposed signage for the application doesn't fall within this application and will be submitted under a separate application. So then we just have some floor plans showing the existing ground floor and the proposed with the subdivision in place. So the floor plate is to include free weights, an activity area, a functional area, changing rooms, a large gym floor area itself, and associated facilities, including changing rooms and staff areas. And then we have some site photos. Obviously, the unit currently is redundant and has no businesses occupying it. And as such, this application has come forward. So we have the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions including the standard time, approved plans, cycle spaces being provided, and the gym being limited to D2 use only, with no changes to that use coming forward without a planning application.
All right, thank you very much. Questions at this point? Nope. Okay. So we move on. We don't have anyone from the Town Council. We don't have an objector, supporter or the applicant. And the ward member is Paul Eppignong. He has sent in the following. Unfortunately, I will otherwise be engaged, so will not be able to attend this meeting in person. I was, however, at the Stowmarket Town Council planning meeting when this application was considered and voted in favour of it then. As District Councillor Ward member, I'm in favour of granting this application for the economic, social and health and wellbeing reasons that have been highlighted. In respect of the latter of these reasons, perhaps another consideration could be for there to be installed a defibrillator on the premises. There is a recognition that more of these we have around the town would be better. Kind regards, Paul Eckhignon. So, members, that's it. That's all the information before us. Time to debate. Councillor Muller, straight off.
Thank you, Chair. I too supported this application when it came before the Planning Committee at Stowmarket Town Council, and I fully support it now. This particular site has formerly been an Aldi store, a Family Bargains and a Poundland, and they have all failed because the shoppers do not tend to go to that site very often for shopping, just for parking. So rather than see it as empty, I totally support it and would recommend approval.
Sorry.
Do we own the site? Yeah, Councillor Haddingham.
Yeah, like Dave, I'd like to see this site being used, and so I'm happy to second it.
Thank you. I'm just curious here. So it says Mid Suffolk District Council owns the site, but do we own the building? I mean, does that mean, who, presumably Poundland built the building, or the people before Poundland? Yeah.
I might be wrong, but I believe that Mid Suffolk bought the building with the car park.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain they did, Chair.
Sorry, lack of knowledge. Yes, I saw another hand go up. Councillor Manson.
Thank you. Yes, although I'm not a fan of a gym, I think it's actually quite good that you've got a gym in the centre of town, because it is actually accessible by sustainable means of transport, being speeding distance from the station and bus stops, and the fact you're going to provide another 17 bike racks or whatever in the centre of town. I can't do anything but support it. Although if people did actually walk from the station and the bus stop and they use their bike, perhaps they wouldn't need to pay for a gym membership. But that's their business. I'm going to support this because I think it is in a sustainable location. And as has been said by colleagues, retail premises don't seem to have done particularly well there. So, and it's good to see this building put back into use rather than sitting there empty. So, good luck to them.
Councillor Field.
Yes, just to agree that this seems to be part of the transition away from retail premises in town centres. So it's a move to be supported. And hopefully it gets us out from paying the business rates, so that would be a financial benefit as well. That's probably prejudicial, isn't it?
Yes, so I likewise will support this, although there is a curry restaurant right opposite, and every time I go there I will now feel very guilty looking at a big gym sign. But of course this is all very positive for the town. It's good to use the space and to bring something forward to what is an unused space. Can we just ask one question quickly? D2 in the recommendation, because the thing about D2 is that could then become other things. So are we just saying we're permitting this use, or are we permitting D2?
So it will just be the gym use,
okay,
and it will be limited to that through a condition.
Fine.
If any other change of use does come forward, it will require an application.
Fine. Okay, thank you. Oh, that caused a flurry of hands. Councillor Eburn and Councillor Mansell.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just on that note, looking at the layout of the gym, I know there isn't a cafe or any kind of space like that where often you do have in those spaces. Would that be permissible within that current use, or if they wanted to vary that, would they then have to come back with something else?
So it would depend on the extent of that. If it was ancillary, i.e. a very small amount, so if they had a coffee bar, for example, maybe with 3 seats, we'd consider that ancillary. If that goes beyond and becomes a significant proportion of their floor space, we'd consider that to be a change of use. But they have a small degree of flexibility for some of those extra parts if they need it.
Councillor Mansell.
I noticed while we're looking at the recommendation that there's nothing about hours of business, and I wonder if that is relevant, whether there is any restriction to when they can open.
So the gym has been proposed to open 24/7, and so yeah, it will be open. Yeah.
Unless members feel there's a planning reason that that should be restricted, if it was in the middle of housing or something like that and you felt that was a problem. But I think, yeah, in this location...
I mean, I don't think there are any residential properties nearby, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
Do you want to come in and advise us, Councillor Muller?
Thank you, Chair. There are some residential properties quite close by to the gym, and it is proposed to open it 24/7, as it does state in the papers. However, I can't see that would be a great problem. The building will be supervised at all time by staff, and to be honest, I might be wrong, it's purely subjective, but I cannot see there's going to be a great deal of movement during the sort of nighttime hours of this place.
Okay, so it's been proposed by Councillor Muller, it's been seconded by Councillor Haddingham, as in the recommendations on page 214 of our papers. All those in favour of the recommendation, can we have a show of hands, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So that just leaves me to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and best wishes for the new year, and see you all in January.